Today we're going to run through some of my favourite settings on the Junipero V2. So yeah, the V2 version of the Junipero has been out for a couple of months now, and when we released it we did these very kind of nice stylized VHS 80s Miami kind of inspired videos for the updated patches, and just a style that we thought suited the kind of overall vibe of the pedal. And as good and as in-depth as these demos are, they're obviously heavily stylized and quite lengthy, so I thought it would be quite nice to kind of put out a video that was kind of just getting straight to it, just showing a few examples of my favorite settings for the 8 different patches. So I've noted down 2 different settings for each of the 8 patches, and this is kind of where I'd set things if I was just like noodling around, not like just playing for myself or whatever. This is how I tend to use the Junipero. It's no secret that I'm a massive fan of modulation, and this V2 version of the Junipero offers quite a lot of improvements over the V1. Not in terms of any like secondary functionality, all the kind of tap and MIDI and stuff, that's all exactly the same. It's just the 8 patches that we've focused on updating. Making the range of the pots a little bit more usable, so some of the really extreme ends of the controls have been either removed or swapped out, or you know, the taper of the pot has been changed, just so you've got a more usable sweep across the pot range, at least for what I consider to be usable anyway. So yeah, I think let's just dive right in with the first patch, which is the chorus and detune. On this first setting I've gone for a kind of fairly standard analog chorus sound, just dialing in a little bit of the detune as well, just to kind of thicken things up a bit and make the sound a little bit wider. And I think it does a really good job of capturing that kind of very 80s classic analog chorus sound. For the second setting I've dialed out the detune completely, so we're just using the chorus part, and then I've also turned the mix fully wet, so you're getting vibrato. And I think the this is one of the settings that kind of goes overlooked in the Junipero, in that when you turn the mix fully wet on the chorus patches, you get those kind of weird vibrato tones, especially when on this setting I'm turning the tone all the way up, so it's cutting out a load of low end, and you're just getting all the high end, so you get this kind of weird lo-fi high pass filtered vibrato sound. Moving on to patch 2, which is the multi-voice chorus. On this first setting I've got the rate turned almost all the way down, so you get this very, very slow, almost frozen chorus sound. The depth and the control knob are turned quite far up, so you get a very deep and intricate chorus sound where you've got all 4 voices going off at once. And again, tone cranked all the way, and when you're mixing back in some of the dry signal, it retains the low end and you still get the sparkly kind of chorus sound on the wet signal. So for this second setting, we've kind of flipped the roles of the rate and depth. So the rate is turned almost all the way up and the depth and control knobs are turned almost all the way down. This creates a kind of weird vocal, almost flanger-like sound. It's very kind of rhythmic and a bit strange, but would be quite nice to sit in like the background of a mix, I think. We're also bringing in quite a lot of the dry signal here, so you kind of retain the in-tuneness of the sound without it going too crazy or too wobbly. Moving on to patch 3, which is the classic flanger. For this, we've cranked the depth and control knobs, and the control knob on this patch controls the feedback. But then the rate is almost all the way down, so you've got a very wide, very vocal flanging sound. It just kind of slowly sweeps through its range. For this second setting, most of the controls are around the kind of middle mark, around noon. And what this gives you is kind of more of a chorus sound, but where you've still got a little bit of that feedback coming in. That's what's kind of turning it into that kind of halfway house between full, flanger with loads of feedback and a traditional chorus sound. Moving on to patch 4, which is the through zero flanger. Again, similar to what we did with patch 3, the settings are basically the rate is turned nearly all the way down and the depth and control knob are turned almost all the way up. We're also going fully wet on this mode, so you get the full effect of the flanger going through zero and cancelling out the signal completely. For this second setting, we've ramped up the speed a little bit and then backed off the depth and the feedback, and then also turned the tone control all the way down. The tone control on the Junipero is one of the things that I think really sets it apart from a lot of other modulation pedals. And what the tone pot on the Junipero does is, when it's kind of set in the middle, it's basically not bypassed, but it's not really affecting anything too drastically. It's kind of in line with your dry signal. When it's turned all the way up, you're high passing the signal, so a lot of the low end's being cut off, and then like we've done on this patch, when you turn it all the way down, you're cutting off a lot of the high end, which lets you create these kind of weird, muddy, watery sounds. And you can bring in the dry signal a little bit if you want to, and that just kind of retains some of the clarity in what you're playing. On to patch 5, which is a 10-stage phaser. We've left the control knob turned almost all the way down at the moment. That, again, similar to the flanger patches, controls the feedback. So for this, we're going for more of a traditional, single knob, phase 90 kind of sound, relatively slow rate, and just kind of something that sits in the background and just kind of mixes in with the clean signal quite nicely. Again, it's pretty unusual for a phaser to have a mix control, which is what the Junipero has. And I think it's really nice because phasers can be a little bit overwhelming, a little bit overbearing on a lot of sounds, especially distorted sounds. So it's really nice to be able to dial in some of that clean signal so that it's not so much. For the second setting on this one, I've dialed back the depth and then turned up the feedback and the rates. You've got this faster, more vocal phasing effect, also allowing in even more of the clean signal so that you get a perfect kind of blend between this very kind of intense and over the top phasing effect and your normal clean signal coming through. Moving on to patch 6, which is the dual mode tremolo. For this first setting, the control knob is all the way down, which is the classic sine wave setting. Relatively high depth and speed, and what we're using here is the mix control to dial back in the clean signal. Again, quite an unusual thing to include on a tremolo, but what I find is quite nice about doing it this way is that you almost get a kind of weird phase shifting effect where the wet signal might be ever so slightly out of sync with the dry signal. It sounds very different to just turning the depth knob back. For this second setting, we've cranked the depth and the control knob. The control knob on this patch controls the shape of the tremolo. So cranking it all the way up goes to more of a repeat percussion, not quite square wave, but more of a choppy tremolo. We've gone fully wet on this setting and also turned the tone knob all the way down. So you've got a very muddy, watery tremolo effect that I think is really nice. Patch 7 is the Harmonic Tremolo. The control knob on this patch alters the Q or resonance of the filters used in the tremolo. On this first setting we've turned it all the way down, which kind of removes it from the circuit, so you've just got the standard harmonic tremolo going on. Relatively high rate and depth, and then just blending back in a little bit of that clean signal. For the second setting, we've gone to more of an extreme where the control knob is turned almost all the way up, as well as the depth, and then the rate is turned pretty much all the way down, and that gives you this very slow but very wide sweeping resonant filter that goes through a very wide range of frequencies. And finally, patch 8 is the Vibe Phase Tremolo. This is a new effect for the V2 Junipero, and what this does is basically combine elements of standard amplitude modulation as well as pitch modulation and phase shifting. What I was aiming for here is kind of some of those old vibrato circuits that you get in things like old magnetone amps and things like that. They just had a very unique sound, and it's something that I wanted to try and capture because it is a really interesting effect that I think often goes overlooked in the world of modulation pedals. On this patch, everything's kind of around the middle apart from the tone control, which is turned all the way down. This gives you a pretty lo-fi, muffled sound, which I think is really good for jazzy rhythm chords. And for this second setting, we're looking at how you can kind of get in the ballpark of a Leslie or a rotary speaker kind of sound with this patch. Turning the rate up, leaning more into the tremolo and the vibrato, and dialing in a little bit of clean signal so you get the chorusing effect. And there you go. I think that just about covers our favourite patches on the new V2 Junipero. Hopefully you've enjoyed this more straightforward and less obviously stylized look into the new patches that are available, and seeing how I would use it just when I'm playing for my own amusement. I'll post a link to the product page of the Junipero on our website down in the description. Let us know in the comments what you thought of some of the sounds, some of the settings that I've picked out. If you happen to already have a Junipero, let us know some of your favourite settings as well. If you're interested in seeing what we're up to on more of a daily basis, be sure to check out our social media pages on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, and we'll see you next time.